My husband, the company's CFO, let his mistress submit an application to transfer me more than 2,000 miles from Seattle down to Houston. So I packed my suitcase, got on a plane, and started a life that no longer had him in it. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember it clearly, because Tuesdays were supposed to be our good day. It was the only night of the week when both Robert and I left the office before 8, met at the little Italian place on Finney Ridge, and pretended we were still the two people who had been madly in love 8 years ago. Tuesday was sacred. Tuesday was proof that there was still something worth holding on to. But that Tuesday, I didn't make it to dinner. I was sitting in my office on the 17th floor of Apex Global, staring at my computer screen with a kind of shock that made the edges of my vision blur like they were fogged over. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed. The cup of coffee had gone ice cold sometime long ago, and on the screen, in a cold corporate font, was the notice that would slowly break everything I thought I knew about this marriage. Internal transfer request. Status: approved. Employee: Evelyn Harrington. Current location: Seattle, Washington. Requested location: Houston, Texas. Effective date: 30 days from approval. Submitted via employee self-service portal. I read it once, then a second time, a third, a fourth. Every time I read it, my heart beat one notch faster, but the words didn't change. Finally, I reached for the desk phone and dialed HR. "I think there's been some kind of mistake," I said, my voice strangely calm compared to the earthquake shaking inside my chest. I never submitted any transfer request. On the other end of the line, a familiar female voice, probably Linda, started typing, the mouse clicking in the silence. "I'm checking the system now, Evelyn. It shows here that the request was submitted through your employee portal. Last Thursday at 2:47 p.m., the system log shows it was done using your own account." I swallowed hard. That's impossible. Last Thursday afternoon, I was in a meeting room with a client. How could I have used my laptop? More typing. A pause. Well, the request has already been approved by your department head and the regional director. Houston has been short on people with a profile like yours for months. They're really excited to know you'll be coming. Really excited to know I was being exiled to Houston. I hung up the phone and sat there, my mind running through one scenario after another. System error? Someone using the wrong account? Someone trying to sabotage me? Every theory sounded more ridiculous than the one before it. And then one thought slipped in, slow and ice-cold like smoke sliding through a crack in the door. Robert, my husband, is the CFO of Apex Global. He knows my password. He could log in anytime he wanted. But why? Why would a husband push his wife all the way to Texas? I shoved that thought away almost immediately. Robert is blunt, sometimes so blunt it borders on cruel, but he's not the kind of man who plays sneaky games behind someone's back. Besides, that afternoon, he was in the executive meeting on the 24th floor. I remember clearly because I was the one who reminded him to bring the documents. He had no reason to do something like this. No reasonable reason at all. Robert and I had problems too, like every couple that has lived together for 8 years. No one is perfect, but I still couldn't believe he could do something this cruel, this calculated, this sneaky. Could he? I didn't drive to the restaurant that night. I called him instead. "Where are you?" His voice came through on the very first ring. "I'm sitting in the restaurant already." "Something came up at work," I said. "Can you come home early tonight? I need to talk." A short silence. "Is something wrong?" "Yes," I answered. "I don't think things are okay." When I got home, the inside was pitch dark. Only the kitchen light was on. Robert was sitting at the kitchen counter. In front of him, a half-finished glass of wine, still wearing his office clothes, a dark blue suit, and a silk shirt that made him look exactly like a CFO people automatically respected. His hair was combed neatly back, clean, just the way he wore it every day to work. His laptop was open, numbers running endlessly across the screen. "You look terrible," he said when I walked in. Not in a cruel way, just blunt, the way he always spoke. I feel terrible. I set my bag down, opened the email on my phone, and slid it across the stone counter to him. He picked it up, scanned it, his eyebrows lifting. Houston? You're transferring to Houston? I didn't submit it, I replied. So who did? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He leaned back in his chair, took a sip of wine, his expression shifting from surprise to consideration. Did someone log into your account? Have you checked your login history? Not yet, but Robert. I paused for a moment. Do you know my account? Did you tell anyone? His eyes turned instantly cold. What are you asking me, Evelyn? I'm not asking anything. I'm just trying to understand how this happened. You think I did this? His voice went flat, dangerous. You think I secretly submitted a transfer request to send my wife to Texas? I didn't say that. But you implied it. He stood up straight, still holding the wine glass, and walked to the window looking out into the backyard. If I wanted you to leave, Evelyn, I would say it to your face. I wouldn't play these roundabout games. I wouldn't secretly send in sneaky applications. If I wanted to end this marriage, I would look you straight in the eye and say, we're getting a divorce. That's who I am. You know that. I did know. Robert had many things: ambition, coldness, sometimes distance. But he wasn't the kind of man who played vague games. He was blunt to the point of cruelty. But the way he said the word divorce made a bad feeling rise clearer than ever before. So if it wasn't you, then who was it? I said. He shrugged. We'll have to investigate. But Evelyn, you should focus on contacting HR tomorrow morning and explaining everything clearly. It's probably just a system error. And if it's not... He paused for a second, the corner of his mouth lifting in an emotionless half-smile. Then someone is playing a very strange joke on you. The next morning, I went straight down to HR, facing this myself instead of making any more phone calls. Linda, still the same person I spoke to yesterday, led me into a small, narrow office, the smell of old coffee mixed with the strong scent of printer ink so thick it made my throat go dry. Evelyn, I understand your anxiety, Linda said, flipping through a few folders. But this transfer request is completely valid. It was sent from your account during work hours, and it went through the proper approval process. Do you have proof? I looked straight at her. At that time, I was in a meeting room. Someone can vouch for that. Of course it can be verified. Linda nodded. But we'll have to open an internal investigation process. She hesitated for a moment, then lowered her voice. But I have to be honest with you. Investigations like this take a lot of time. In the meantime, your transfer decision has already been approved. Houston is waiting for you in 3 weeks. Linda glanced at the screen. The timeline has been updated. Houston pushed the deadline because they have a key project about to launch. They need someone with systems architecture experience immediately. Everything in my head started to spin. Can I refuse? I asked. Linda's expression softened, almost pitying. You can. But if you refuse a transfer decision that's already been approved, according to company policy, it could lead to termination. That's ridiculous. That's the reality in large corporations, Evelyn. I left that room feeling like I'd just stepped out of a Kafka-style nightmare. As if someone had taken over my life, my career, and no one around cared about who had done it or why it happened. They only cared about procedures, policies, processing steps, and checkboxes on forms. When I got back to my desk, I saw a bright yellow sticky note stuck to my computer screen. The corner of the paper slightly curled up, like someone had rubbed it back and forth a few times. The handwriting in blue ballpoint was rounded, slanting slightly to the right. Heard about Houston. LOL. Guess someone doesn't like you. No signature, but the sickly sweet perfume smell was still clinging to the edge of the paper. A vanilla mixed with burnt orange scent I smelled every morning in the elevator. I knew right away it was Sloane's. Sloane showed up at Apex Global a year ago, right when I thought I knew every face here. 25 years old, light brown dyed hair, always softly curled at the ends, lips always in lipstick, nails always painted a new color. A marketing intern, daughter of a major shareholder on the board of directors. She and Robert had known each other since childhood. Family friends was how we introduced it. Last month, Robert said, "Let her intern for a few months. Help her dad a bit. It also helps the company." Sloane wasn't the kind of evil that screamed in people's faces. She just had a talent for turning everything into a joke, and I was always the punchline. When I talked about the new systems project, she snorted, "God, you're so serious. Relax." When I wore office dresses, she looked me up and down and said, "Cute. Kind of a mother-in-law vibe, huh?" Robert never saw it as a problem. "Sloane is young," he said when I mentioned a few times that she went too far. "She grew up in a different kind of environment, but she doesn't mean any harm. She'll grow up." But I wasn't so sure people grow out of the habit of using others as a joke. They just learn how to hide it better. At noon, the office was a bit emptier because many people went down to the cafeteria on the floor below. I was standing in the pantry, my hand placing a coffee capsule into the machine's low, steady rumbling filling the space, the smell of coffee starting to spread, hitting my empty stomach hard. The white light from the ceiling lamps reflected off the stainless steel counter, off the shiny surface of the coffee machine. I tried to let my mind go blank for a few minutes, just focused on watching the brown stream flow out, hot, thick, forming a light foam on the surface. A simple thing I thought I could still control. The pantry door swung open, the sound of high heels clicking sharply on the vinyl tile floor. "Hi, Evelyn." Sloane's voice stretched out, cheerful as if she were walking into a party. She opened the fridge, reached in and grabbed a can of soda. The sound of metal clinking together. "Heard you're transferring down to Houston." "Wow." She popped the tab, a soft hiss, the artificial lemon smell drifting out. "The climate down there must be interesting, huh? Hot, humid, traffic jams, hurricanes too. Like the hard level in the game of life." I turned to look at her. "Who told you?" Sloane shrugged, leaning back against the counter, one leg crossed casually in front of the other, looking as comfortable as if she were sitting on her own couch. "Rumors travel fast." She took a sip of the drink, the corner of her mouth lifting into a smile like she was watching a comedy trailer. "Houston, you know, flying from cool Seattle down to a place that's both hot and humid. If it were me, I'd cry for real." I tried to keep my voice even. "There was a mistake. It's being handled." Sloane nodded, her eyes still on me, as if she were measuring my reaction. "Mistake. It's always a mistake. But if you really do go, at least you'll get away from all of this." She waved a hand in a circle, pointing at the air between the 4 pantry walls, then pointed up at the ceiling, pointed toward the row of desks outside, like, this wasn't just the office, but my whole life. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying not to grind my teeth. Sloane let out a soft laugh. "Come on, Evelyn. You two haven't been happy for a long time. Anyone can see it. Does it mean anything to keep going like that?" My hand tightened around the paper coffee cup, hot enough it was almost burning. "My marriage isn't for you to judge," I said slowly. Sloane shrugged, looking completely untouched. "Not sure." "What did you say?" I asked again, like I'd misheard. She dipped her head to hide a triumphant smile, but I still saw it. "I just said that's all. Houston is far, but at least you won't have to keep acting out the happy family play anymore." Then she turned on her heel, shoes clicking away, leaving me standing there with a cup of coffee burning hot in my hand and a cold anger spreading from my toes all the way to my brain. "I just said that's all. Houston is far, but at least you won't have to keep acting out the happy family play anymore." Then she turned on her heel, shoes clicking away, leaving me standing there with a cup of coffee burning hot in my hand and a cold anger spreading from my toes all the way to my brain. What game was she trying to play here? Act 4. That night, when Robert came home late and went straight into the bedroom like always, I sat alone in front of my laptop and started doing what my professional instincts pushed me to do: dig deeper myself. The first thing I opened was the employee portal, my own account, recent activity history, and just like my worst dread, it was there. A login at exactly 2:47 p.m. on Thursday, the exact moment I had been sitting in a meeting room with a client, with a presentation in front of me and eyes waiting for my answers. The IP address showed as Apex Global's internal IP. I took a screenshot. Next, I opened the physical location logs. All company computers, when accessing the system, are tracked by department location. The line of data that appeared on the screen made my heart drop straight into my stomach. The transfer request was sent from a computer belonging to the marketing department. I sat completely still for a few seconds. The marketing department, where Sloan was interning. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. I didn't want to believe that a 25-year-old girl could do something so hateful, destructive, and calculated. But the arrows on the screen were pointing in only one direction, and I couldn't pretend I didn't see it. I took another screenshot. Then I sat there and started asking myself, how could she have gotten my login information? I was always very careful with that. Robert would never share my access information. That would even be a serious security violation. But then a memory flashed in my head. 3 weeks ago, Sloan had borrowed my laptop. She said her computer was updating and she needed to send an urgent email. At that time, I had handed it to her without thinking too much. And at that time, I was still logged into the portal. She could have seen my password, could have memorized it, or worse, taken a picture of the screen while I wasn't paying attention. Sloan was very smart, smarter than what was safe. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glowing laptop screen in the dark room. I asked myself what I should do. Confront Sloan? She would scoff, roll her eyes. "Oh my God, you're so imaginative." Show it to Robert? He would say, "You're being paranoid again? Sloan is just a kid." Show it to HR? They would say, "It only shows it came from the marketing department. Anyone could sit there." No witnesses, no confession, nothing at all. I closed the laptop, got into bed. Robert was lying with his back turned, breathing evenly, as if nothing had happened in my life. The days after that passed in a thick fog of tension and paranoia. At the company, I tried to go through the official channels. I met Greg, my direct manager. He really looked sympathetic. "Evelyn, I don't know how to say this to you," he said, his fingers lightly tapping the desk. "This request went through the proper process, approved at every level. Houston is expecting you. If you pull out now, your file will be marked very badly. It could even lead to termination. But I didn't submit it." Then, who did? I couldn't answer. No evidence. Sloan always appeared at the right moments, with that wide, cheerful smile. Sitting in the shared dining area. "Heard Houston gets over 30 degrees, sis. Remember to buy sunscreen, okay?" In the elevator. "There's lots of oil there. You're probably about to get rich." Every sentence sounded harmless, but cut clearly, stab by stab. That night, I brought up the transfer with Robert again. He was reviewing documents, didn't look up. Stop with the conspiracy stuff. Either accept it or fight it through the proper process. Don't turn everything into drama. This isn't a conspiracy. Someone forged my request. Then HR will find out. They're dragging it out. They don't see this as a priority. Then push harder. You're a senior architect. You have a voice. I took a deep breath. "Robert, don't you find it strange that this happened right when Sloan is interning in marketing, right when she borrowed my laptop?" The air in the room dropped to below zero. Robert shut his laptop. His face went cold immediately. Cold, like slowly melting ice. "Are you accusing Sloan?" "I'm just—" "If you are accusing her," he cut in, "then you'd better have evidence. Solid, undeniable evidence." He spoke slowly, clearly on every word. "Sloan didn't do anything wrong. She's trying to build a career. She's not a villain in some cheap TV drama." "I didn't say she was." "But you're implying it." Robert stood up from the sofa. I'm tired, Evelyn. Tired of your paranoia. Tired of the way you always see yourself as a victim. He walked away. If you want to believe the whole world is plotting against you, go ahead, but leave Sloane out of this. And I heard the bedroom door close, sharp, cold, echoing through a house so silent it was almost empty. That weekend, something quietly changed inside me. I was in my office, flipping through every file, every stack of documents to prepare for the possibility that I might have to transfer. I called it stress cleaning, to make myself feel less like I was losing control. I was about to look for Sloane to hand over a few internal tasks she was involved in with the marketing team, when the wind from the slightly open window suddenly blew a thin sheet of paper off the desk. And I saw my name, clearly. Impossible to mistake. I froze for a few seconds. A small notebook, the kind with a spiral binding sold everywhere in stationery stores, was lying half open on Sloane's desk. She must have forgotten it when she went somewhere. In that instant, I was about to close it. Respect privacy, be a decent person, forget this. But the name Evelyn burned under that thin sheet of paper made my heart beat one notch harder. I opened the notebook. The first pages were completely harmless. Meeting notes, to-do lists, expense tracking, messy handwriting, a few random doodles in the margins. But then, when I flipped to the middle of the notebook, the world inside me shifted. Operation Evelyn Removal. Target: get her out of the picture. Timeline: 2 to 3 months. Method: transfer request. Houston ideal. Far enough. Hot enough. Miserable enough for her to break herself. Phase 1. Obtain credentials. Laptop trick worked perfectly. Phase 2. Send request during work hours. Completed. Thursday, 2:47 p.m. Phase 3. Wait for approval. Completed. Faster than expected. Phase 4. Observe reaction. And underneath, in a different color of ink, strokes darker and sharper. Note: J suspects but can't prove anything. Perfect. Let her squirm. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, the notebook trembling slightly in my hands. This wasn't a joke, not a guess, not paranoia. This was a plan. Calculation, cruelty written line by line, step by step. I flipped to the next page, my hands still shaking, and there was nothing else. I took out my phone and photographed every page, every corner, every line. The light was clear enough, the focus sharp enough. Evidence that couldn't be denied. I took a deep breath, closed the notebook, and placed it back exactly where it had been on the desk, as if it had never been touched. The smartest thing would have been to confront her right then. Lay everything out in front of them. Put the evidence on the table and force everyone to look at it and take responsibility. But I wanted to know the reason. Why did she have to push me out of my home? I now had gold evidence on my phone, and I would use it at the right time, in the right way. A CT6. That was what I needed. Not pity, but strategy. Patricia's office was in the center of the city, above a coffee shop called Morning Brew. Her office smelled faintly of leather and old books. The heavy oak desk on the wall behind her desk were law degrees carefully framed. She was in her early 50s, salt and pepper hair neatly cut, glasses hanging from a thin cord around her neck. Her handshake was firm, brief. She gestured for me to sit, opened a legal pad, and picked up her pen. Tell me everything. I told her everything. Sloane's notebook, the Operation Evelyn Removal Plan, the cold-blooded lines about pushing me down to Houston to suffer as much as possible. I told her about 8 years of marriage slowly turning into 2 strangers living in the same house. Patricia took notes, her handwriting neat, sometimes looking up to ask short, precise questions,